So, good morning. Let us discuss today about 05th January 2016 newspaper. The first article is very much important for the mains because non-alignment to multi-alignment or multilateralism, this is one thing which is very much onto the government's agenda. It is kind of a shift in India's foreign policy. So in this context, let us analyze the M.K. Narayan's article. So, Cold War has given definitely certain outputs to India. It has increased the trust of India across the countries. It developed its own goodwill, and its accommodative nature is appreciated. And many of the countries feel that India is a power to be reckoned with now. So, in this context, the non-alignment in today's world, it's almost outlived. So, in a real politic, we can say that once the Cold War has ended, the non-alignment movement also to be said to be, ended. But however, many of the Nehruvian era diplomats, they argue that the non-alignment itself is not a reaction to the Cold War, but it was a reaction to the protection of the sovereignty of the newly independent countries. So, M.K. Narayan's article, what it talks about is the recent three visits. They show a great light on this multilateralism or multi-alignment. So, the defense ministers visit to United States, prime minister's visit to Russia, and then Pakistan. After that, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to India. So, all these towards different powers, we are engaging them simultaneously. It means we can accommodate different interests simultaneously. It shows the maturity of our diplomacy. With the United States of America, we made a progress on SISMOVA, LSA. So it means our defense technology and trade initiative is going to go for the new level. And also we are buying the diversification of our defense purchases is an important part of this multi-alignment. If you observe previously, the Russia was the major source of the weapons for us. Now it is Russia, America, Israel, and even we are buying from Japan. This shows that to what extent our resources are getting diversified. So in this context, with United States, P8I maritime patrol aircraft, C-17 Globemaster, M777 ultralight howitzers. These are the things which we are buying from United States. Coming to Russia, Kamov 22060, we are manufacturing that in India. So with the Make in India initiative, it is very much aligned. And Triumph air missile defense system and Mi-17 helicopters, all these things are almost agreed. And another thing with the Russian visit is, Russia though appeared moving close to Pakistan, so India is able to make effectively in the joint statement that with regard to the Afghanistan, no outside interference shall be allowed. Shinzo Abe's visit is important both diplomatically and also economically. If you observe over here, the joint statement clearly talks about the freedom of navigation and also concerns are increasing threats in the Indo-Pacific. So India has officially made a statement about the Pacific Ocean. So India tries to explore its interests beyond the Indian Ocean, and it appears to be directly targeted again as the China. Another thing is, the India-Japan nuclear agreement is almost on verge of completion. And Japan recognizes India as a responsible nuclear power. So this is a very positive development which can bring in the nuclear energy security to us. But however, the Pakistan, the relations appear still weak. In spite of Prime Minister Modi's landing in Pakistan, the mistrust is still high. In this context, recently at the Combined Commanders Conference on INS Vikramaditya, Prime Minister also stressed on this particular mistrust, and there shall not be place for complacency. If you see in India and Pakistan relationships, how the Indian strategy has changed. India's initial strategy was to isolate the Pakistan on terror in the international forums. But however, Pakistan was the best phase in its history now. The reason being is America considers Pakistan as a strategic ally with regard to the stability in Afghanistan and also in connection between the West Asia, South Asia and Central Asia. So the recent supply of F-16 jets, extension of coalition fund and the Sharif's visit to United States and the joint statement of President Obama and the Prime Minister Sharif saying that all the outstanding issues including Kashmir has to be solved is a reflection of this. So added to that, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, it is providing a huge financial muscle to the Pakistan. So in this case, an assertive Pakistan with a dominant military is always a threat to India. So India has no place for complacency. Now, on the light of recent terrorist attack in Pathankot, so what are the things we need to understand? So there are two simultaneous terrorist attacks on Indian establishments. One is on Pathankot air base and the second is at Mazar-e-Sharif in in Afghanistan. So where the Indian consulate is placed. In this context, we can see that the India-Pakistan dialogue and the terror, they go together almost always. That is, talk and terrorism are coexisting. So from 1997, when this composite dialogue has started till today, so whenever the dialogue is resumed, there is a strong forces that were trying to derail this particular process. So governments in a knee-jerk reaction, they tried to suspend the dialogue immediately. So in this context, the dialogue never showed itself as a solution to the problem. So it virtually gave a veto to the non-state actors or these fringe groups. Now, in this context, we need to break certain myths. We have to show restraint and we need to take forward this particular dialogue process. And we have to believe that dialogue is the only solution and strengthen our establishment. And second is, Pakistani military itself is not a monolith. It means not a single structure. In the Pakistan army itself, there are other elements, jihadi elements, which oppose these democratic forces or this dialogue process. And Pakistan is also a victim of this. In this context, this article specifically talks about national security doctrine for India and also national security strategy. So let all the political parties come together and let's frame a national security doctrine. So our ability to handle these terror attacks will increase. So we can bring in a common command structure for all the intelligence agencies and anti-terror forces, which increases our response and also the ability to handle them. As India has no security doctrine till date, our response is mostly ad hoc and it is dependent on the ability and the leadership of the day's government. So this ad hocism has to be done away with. And finally, our intelligence agencies run in a highly opaque system, disintegrated from each other. There is very much need for them to coordinate and to provide for reliable intelligence inputs to our firefighting agencies or the frontline agencies. And coming to diplomatic crisis in West Asia. So you know that West Asia, the Saudi is Sunni dominated and Iran is Shia dominated. Every problem which is ongoing in West Asia, it is a kind of a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So in this context, recently Saudi Arabia hanged a Shia cleric. So this hanging has led to a huge emotional out responses in the Iran. And there is bombing or else there is fire in the Iran embassy, in the Saudi embassy in Iran, and Saudi called for the, cutting down of all diplomatic relationships with Iran. So in this context, Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr is a Shia cleric who is hanged to death in Saudi Arabia. So what are the dangers or implications to India? Whenever there is a disturbance in West Asia, oil prices are bound to increase. And second thing is, already the Syrian conflict is very conflicted, became complicated because of Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Iran. So the Saudi Arabia tries to promote the opposition forces which take up against the Assad. And next, Iran tries to take it up against or support the Assad. And finally, Turkey wants to fight against the Kurds. So this problem, which is supposed to go forward in a peace process, it's going to get much complicated. So here, who are the differences between Sunnis and Shias that clearly explained them. So for example, after the death of the Prophet, so there are two distinct groups. One is Abu Bakr group and the next one is Ali group. So the blood of Prophet is the Ali group and Abu Bakr group is the follower of the Prophet. So this Ali group, it has become Shias, and Abu Bakr followers, they are called as Sunnis. So this is what is the major difference between Sunni and Shia. And the next is Kuril Islands. So these islands in Pacific, they have an important dateline and dispute. Actually, this particular infographic is made directly from the BBC. So I have kept that particular news over there. In 1885, these were the habitants of the Japanese people. During the Second World War, Russia took the administrative control of these islands. And after the end of the Second World War, Japan has relinquished all its rights over the Kuril Islands in the San Francisco Peace Treaty. But however, there are 4 islands which Japan do not see it as a part of the Kuril Islands group. So, Japan calls it as the North Territories and Russia calls it as Southern Kurils. So it means the Japan do not recognize it as a part of the Kuril group, so they do not go to the Russia as per the San Francisco Peace Agreement. So because of this dispute of Kuril Islands, there was no peace treaty between the Japan and the Russia till date. Why such a thing now? The reason is there are huge thorium reserves in these islands. Oil and natural gas reserves were there in these islands. So there are resources abundant. These things both the countries are not willing to lose. So Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says that only a summit level talks can reduce these particular issues. So if you can remember these 4 Kuril islands, that is Kunashir, Ithrop, Shikotan and Haboma. So these are the 4 Kuril islands that are in the dispute. And next is Turkish War on the Kurds. Remember that there are 3 countries that have the Kurds. One is Syria, and then Turkey, and then Iraq. These are the 4 countries that have the Kurds. In Turkey, the Kurds recently got a representation in their parliament. So the party name is called HDP. The Kurds, this is the leftist party, and there is a militant faction that is called Kurdistan's Workers' Party or PKK, Kurdistan's Workers' Party. In Syria, the Kurdistan fighters, they are called People Protection Units, and Iraqi Kurds, remember that as. Now, Iraqi and Syria Kurds, these are the allies to United States. And United States and Turkey declared the Kurdistan Workers' Party as a terrorist group. Now Mr. Erdogan, a rightist wing leader in Turkey, he tries to align HDP with Kurdistan Workers' Party. The HDP is a democratic party and this is an extremist element. But however, many of the guerrillas who are the former fighters in the Kurdistan Workers' Party, now they are the cadres of the HDP. Now Erdogan, he tried to change the constitution of the Turkey from parliament to presidential system to gain ultimate powers. Things got dampened because of the representation of this HDP. So from then onwards, he tried to intermix and raise the threats of HDP and KWP taking over the country. But in the Syrian war, the Kurds of Kurdistan Working Party and People Protection Units of Syria, they are very active, and now the Turkey fears that a separate movement or a separate nationalistic movements can come up for a territory for the Kurdistan Turks, the Turkey Kurdistan, and also the Syria's Kurds. So that's why it is already taking a military action against them. Instead of fighting the Islamic State, it is actually fighting the Kurds and bombing these Kurds dominant areas in the southeast. So here the America's dilemma is it has to fight the Islamic State and also it has to fight the Kurdistan Workers' Party and support the Turkey, which is an ally of NATO. So in this context, the weakening of the rights to the minorities in Turkey, it's going to fuel further this cessationist tendencies. That's what is the author talks about. And again, the Doha. So here, the UPSC, the major question will be WTO versus new partnerships that are been coming up, new multilateral arrangements that are coming up. So already we have discussed in previous articles. The WTO has a fair mechanism and a dispute resolution system. On the other hand, either Trans-Pacific Partnership or Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Pact or Partnership, all these three things, they do not have this dispute settlement mechanism and they are favorable or biased towards the Western interests. And there is no equality treatment of everyone. So that's why they cannot substitute the WTO as an international body guiding the trade talks across the countries, which is based on the principles of equity. Now, Doha Development Agenda, it has to be taken forward by India, one, through aligning with the similar countries in Africa and Asia, and the second thing is, it has to stress on the Doha Development Agenda as a part of the Sustainable Developmental Goals. So the recently declared Sustainable Development Goals, they also have the Doha Development Agenda as a process to create the wealth and to fight the fight these growing menaces of poverty and unemployment. So you can also take these two towards taking our dialogue forward or securing our interests in the WTO. A BCCI panel. Again, one of my students said he is going to record a video on that. So BCCI, what is the Lodha committee is talking about? So first one is, daily management of the BCCI has to be separated and made professional. And governing council shall have equal representation to all the states. And the player's voice has to be increased in the BCCI representation. So these are the things which it has talked about. So in this case, the membership, only one vote per the state, and every state gets a right to represent. And the state associations will also have a uniformity of structure. Now there will be total members of the governing council will be reduced to 9, and separate governing councils will exist for IPL and BCCI. And the players, a players association will be formed, and this players association will also have a representation. In BCCI governing council also this particular IPL franchises will have a representation. And finally, an auditor will be placed to check the expenditures of this BCCI, and also ombudsman and election officer will be placed to oversee the election process of the BCCI. So these are the various systemic reforms which are being suggested by this panel. Thank you very much and all the best.